Welcome to Savage Minds. I'm your host, Julian Vigo. Today's guest is Hala Shoman, a Palestinian from Gaza and a PhD researcher in sociology at Newcastle University, focusing on Palestinian women at the intersection of colonial and patriarchal violence. Her research explores decolonial feminist frameworks, cultural renegotiations of religion and tradition, and social justice in conflict-affected settings. Hala is the host of Palestinia, a groundbreaking podcast with Palestine Deep Dive and the world's first Palestinian-led platform dedicated to examining the gender dynamics of Israeli violence in Palestine. She is also a committed social and political activist who, just days before the onset of the ongoing Israeli genocide against Gaza, she left to begin her doctoral studies and has since been unable to return home, finding herself locked outside of her homeland. As an emerging scholar and a writer for We Are Not Numbers, Hala's recent work introduces the concepts of reprocide, the systematic targeting of reproductive health as a weapon of genocide in Gaza, developed through analysis of real-time testimonies from the ground. Beyond academia, Hala has extensive experience in human rights advocacy, gender justice, and social equity projects. As a consultant with the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights in the State of Palestine, she has conducted research on legal systems, domestic violence, and feminist decolonial methodologies, engaging diverse stakeholders, including policymakers, religious leaders, and grassroots activists. Hala is passionate about facilitating critical discussions on decolonialization, equity, and global justice. She has led decolonial learning workshops and research projects across institutions such as Palestinian universities and the University of Milano Bicocca, advocating for systemic change and equitable partnerships. Her work is driven by a deep commitment to transforming knowledge production, challenging colonial power structures, and creating inclusive and participatory learning environments. I welcome Hala Shoman to Savage Minds. I contacted you some time ago in response to some of the more bizarre statements being made by Western feminists about the situation in the West Bank and Gaza, and more specifically, the ongoing genocide.
Yeah.
And someone said, you have to speak with Hala. So I looked you up, and I'm so happy to have you on the show. Let's go through your life before you left for Newcastle, because you are from Gaza. And a lot of our listeners have read news reports over the past 2+ years, but they really still don't understand it, because I think it takes to be there in a large degree to understand what happens as a Palestinian living either in the West Bank or Gaza. I put up a film I made of the Mahsam, one of the first Mahsam I went through. It was probably the third. And a lot of people don't realize that it's not just the word roadblock. It's not like, oh, how inconvenient. I tell people most men in the West Bank are blocked from working because of the very deep restrictions on their travel.
Yeah.
So you have a whole tranche of society, the male sector, that are not allowed to go to work because of the way, especially during the second Intifada, the way that the rules were made against men between the ages of 16 and 35, for instance. Gaza, when I was in the West Bank, I always knew was another scene entirely. And in fact, right before I came to the West Bank in 2002, travel was limited. I could no longer go to the West Bank where I had research to do. There was the Mental Health Institute of Gaza, where I had a very important interview with the director of that institute. And we ended up having to do our interview on the phone. But I always knew intellectually and from what I read that the West Bank was really a vacation compared to Gaza. So could you please discuss I hate to say it like that, but it's true. If you could discuss your life growing up in Gaza and everything basically that you could to shed a light for our listeners about life there and your soon departure for Newcastle.
Okay, thank you. I'll start from 2005. It's the year when Israel have dismantled their illegal settlements from inside Gaza. At that year, I went with my family to Gaza. We were living in Saudi Arabia, so I was born there, raised there, as my family went there to work because of the economic situation in Gaza because of the Israeli restrictions. So we went to Gaza to attend our cousin's wedding, and it was 2005. And when we were there, just like for a vacation, a holiday, there is nothing stable like in politics in Palestine, but mainly in Gaza. When we were there, Israel started like dismantling their illegal settlements, and they closed the borders. And since that time, we got stuck in Gaza. Fortunately, it was like a good thing to be in Palestine and Gaza, but this is how it happened, like away from our home, our belongings, our everything was still there in Saudi Arabia, but we got stuck there. And after that, in 2000, like, I don't know if people know or not, but Gaza have been under strict blockade for at least like now 20 years, since 2005. At the beginning, it was like non-formal, so it was movement restriction. Israel just closed the borders and the fence between Gaza and the occupied areas or Israel. And after that, it was like it became formally a blockage over Gaza. And so many, like, I remember the first time in 2008 when I was doing my exam, Arabic exam, the first exam as a high school student. I was 15. And at that time, suddenly, we saw like the ground shaking, the sky is like becoming apocalyptical. Everyone screaming. Students were like fainting on the ground. I saw my teacher putting his hand over his ears and screaming. It was like very like nonsense. It was like a nightmare or even worse. And that was like the first Israeli aggression I had witnessed in my life as a 15-year-old girl. And then after that, we had the Israeli 2012 aggression, 2014 Israeli aggression, the Great March of Return, and many Palestinians, the hundreds of Palestinians they killed and maimed. And then we had the 2021 Israeli aggression, 2022. And even like people forget that even before this genocide, 2023 had Israeli aggression in Gaza. Israel had launched aggression in May over us in Gaza for at least 5 days. It was horrific. I was doing my field work in Gaza. It was shocking. I couldn't like go on to in my field work like just to complete it within or just after that aggression, because it's very difficult. It changes so many things on the ground, but also emotionally and psychologically for me as a researcher, but also as a person from inside Gaza, as family and people who got like injured or killed. And so many scenes had changed in Gaza. So people, like, sometimes people think that things started on the October the 7th, but at all it didn't. It's just a continuation of everything that Israel have been doing for the last more than 77 years. And even like in the same year, 5 months before, Israel have been launching Israeli aggression over Gaza. When the genocide started, at the beginning of October, I had to go back to Newcastle University because I was a teacher assistant, and it was my first time to teach in the UK at the uni. And also I finished my field work, so my visa regulation obliged me to go back to the UK at that time. So I went back. My husband was supposed to follow me 2 weeks after to sort some things out. He had like job opportunity to work here in the UK, already confirmed, and he was like going to follow me. I went before him, and a few days later, the Israeli genocide started. I tried to go back to Gaza. I tried to, be reunited with my family. Anyone from Gaza would tell you this. Whenever Israel launches an Israeli aggression over us, we usually choose either to be together or to separate each other. So if someone was injured or killed, then not the whole family will be killed. In my family situation, we usually choose to stay together. So if something happened to us, it's gonna happen to all of us. So no one will stay to mourn the rest of the family. And for me, I was the only one stuck outside, not able to be with my family, to help them, to aid them, to anything that would happen to them will also happen to me. So I was the one, I felt like I was in a blockade. I wasn't able to get back. And I was the one stuck outside while everyone was inside. And in each Israeli aggression, like the Palestinian community, specifically in Gaza, where I grew up and lived my life, we're very, we're very close to each other's. So whenever something is happening, an Israeli aggression, me and the community, specifically the youth, will be going to hospitals to volunteer, to, the shelter places in schools, in homes, in tents, in hospitals, gathering whatever we can from ourselves and our neighbors and go and distribute it to the people who became in more need than us because of the situation. So the situation in Gaza before the genocide was bad, was horrific. Everything was getting worse with time. So I remember that in each Israeli aggression, we had two things that we used to say. First thing is that an Israeli aggression ends, the other Israeli aggression will start the way it ended. For instance, the 2014 Israeli aggression ended by bombing the Italy tower or bridge in Gaza, so the high bridges. We knew that it will start by this. 2021, it started by that, the genocide the same. And this other thing that we knew is that however it ends also, like any Israeli aggression happens, the other one will be much worse. And you can see like going through all of them until going to the genocide. So it just gets worse. So situation in Gaza was bad. However, this like Israeli aggressions or like the amount of harm and damage that each aggression have inflicted on us was not usually very damaging to everyone. So there was like some people in the community who would stay able to help the others, which is something that we haven't seen in this Israeli genocide. In the genocide, everyone was equally devastated, displaced, had multiple family members killed, many relatives. Most of us know at least hundreds of people who have been killed in this genocide. And this is something like I would know 1, 2, or maybe maximum 10 people who were killed in other Israeli aggressions, but not like hundreds of people who were killed in this one. So it was bad. Economic situation was bad. Israel have always, like within the blockade over Gaza, they have always controlled the calorie consumption of people, the water consumption of people. They've always done that, but not to the limit of, enforced malnourishment, enforced starvation that we've witnessed within the genocide.
Can you describe the water situation? Because a lot of people do not know about this, despite it having been covered in the media even well before, even during the second Intifada, the water division was noted quite a bit in the West Bank, because even there, the settlers get one amount, the Palestinians living in the West Bank get another. Were your rations on the same level as that of the Palestinians in the West Bank? What were they before 7 October?
In the West Bank, it's known that wells and fountains and all of that is controlled by Israel, even if people are living on their in the places where they live, like on their lands, on their farms, or in their villages and cities. Any water, like well or place, will be controlled by Israel, and people will have like scarcity of reaching out to that water. Even in Gaza, most of the water was not allowed to reach to all the Palestinians. I remember that 96 of the underground water that we used to think that it could be like a substitute for the water that we can't get because of the Israeli blockade, was also polluted, so we couldn't use. Even I remember some projects to purify the water to make it a drinking water of this underground water or the sea water. Also was very difficult because Israel didn't allow many of the devices, many of the infrastructure to get into Gaza so people can use them. So water has been always an issue. I don't remember the exact proportion of how many cups is allowed to every single human in Gaza, even before the genocide, and compared to how many cups, or you can say pools of water, is allowed to every Israeli settler in the occupied lands. But there were a huge difference between the two of them, and things got worse, specifically with the beginning of the genocide, as people didn't find clean water to drink, clean water for sanitary, and anything cooking, even cooking. And the worst is that even babies, infants, because of the Israeli bombardment, because of fear, because of losing their moms, many had to depend on formula, baby formula and milk. But this milk, whenever it was available, it had to be done in a polluted water. So those babies had diarrhea and many other medical complications because the water itself is not clean. Not to mention that the formula has been affected by the blockade, and Israel was even removing them, not just from the aid trucks that was entering Gaza, but also from the international missions who were coming to rescue children, and they brought some formulas with them that was even confiscated at the Israeli borders, and they were not even allowed to carry one bottle of milk or baby formula that should be used inside hospitals. So we're talking about Israel control of every aspect of our lives, even before the genocide. I remember for years in Gaza, we didn't have pasta, it wasn't allowed. We didn't have chocolate, we didn't have crisp, it wasn't allowed to enter Gaza. So we're talking about very simple things that Israel control in so many ways. And it's not just things that enter Gaza, but also the import. I remember one of the organizations was helping some farmers to get their, corpse exported outside Gaza so they can profit and all of that. Israel wouldn't allow them to get them out until they remove, for instance, the strawberry, until they remove the green, cap from it. So they make sure that it doesn't live long because it needs this cap so it lives longer. So they even control how long the corpse, even if exported, how long it would live, how it would do, and all of that. So it's a holistic system of control by Israel. Anything gets in, anything gets out, it's all controlled by them.
The World Health Organization recommendations for water generally fall to 100 liters per person. In Gaza, the recommendations were, again, controlled by Israel, 82.7 to 84.6 liters per day per person. But that was rarely the case, if ever, because 40% of the water supplies were contaminated. And then there was a working paper that came out of the UN in the fall, I believe November of 2023, that addresses the weaponization of access to water, energy, and food that Israel had basically set into action. And that gives a very grim look at what's happening, because they say that the war had diminished, what Israel calls the war, what the UN at that time calls the war, but the genocide had diminished the water supply in Gaza by 95%, forcing the population to use, as we know from the hospital reports, unsafe water and sanitation facilities, thus calling out more of the public health crisis and risks to the public for issues like cholera, amongst other diseases. I mean, this is pretty insane because on the West Bank, even though the situation I said earlier is better, What's cruel about the West Bank is that you have Palestinians living with very little water compared to the settlers, right?
Yeah.
So in the West Bank, the water supply, again, it's all controlled by Israel. And before 2023, Palestinians in the West Bank already face severe water disparities and chronic shortages due to the Israeli policies of discriminatory water distribution and allocation. But the average daily water consumption per person was approximately 82.4 liters per person. And in communities that were not connected to the water network, the consumption went way down to 26 liters per person. The Israeli settlers, guess how much they get to use? I don't expect you to have this on hand, but 247 liters per person. Basically 3 times as much as the most beneficent Palestinians who are right near the water taps. Those who are not, it becomes much more perverse. If you do the math, it's almost 10 times as much, basically, for those who are at a distance from these water supplies. When you start to look at the haves and have-nots within the situation of Palestine, both the West Bank and Gaza, the situation is grim. Can you talk a bit about what your family has been through? Because even though you've been stuck, as it were, in the UK, your family, are they in Gaza still?
Yeah, my family in Gaza. It's very difficult to speak about what they've been through because it's a lot. Like, it's 2 years of Israeli genocide over Gaza, and we've lost like some relatives and so many things. But let's start with the beginning. Like, when it has started, the genocide over Gaza, I remember on the on the 14th of October, when Israel have ordered people to go to the south, because and they like divided Gaza to north and south and all of that. And remember that day I had like two teaching seminars, and it was like 2 a.m. in the morning when the news came. And I wasn't able to reach to my family. My family had already evacuated the tower in Gaza city where they live. And they were like sheltering in some relatives' house, like a little bit away from the heavy bombarded area in Tel El Hawa where they were residing. And I was like, I saw the news. I know that they have no electricity, they have no internet, they have no way of knowing that there is like this call, or this forced displacement order that they need to know about, and then make the decision if they would like to go or not. So I was trying to reach out to them. I was trying to call everyone. It was late at night. People are so tired from... On that day, my family had displaced at least 4 times, going and coming back, and then going to another place, then displacing from it to another place until they reached that final destination where they were at. And I was like trying to call everyone to just like let them know about the information. And I kept doing that until 7 a.m. my time. I sent my uni that I can't go. I will not be teaching today. I can't do that. And I was like anticipating the second Nakba. People will get like on mass level, mass displacement, and like how the world is allowing this to happen. And in the UK, life was going very normal. Nothing is happening at all. And at the same time, in my mind, in the news, in my communication with my family, it was like apocalyptical. It was just like starting. Everything was starting, and I wasn't even able to know anything about them. Then at 7, like around 7, I was able to call my sister. I told her about the news. She told me, I don't know if we'll go to the south. It's very difficult to move. It's very difficult to know anything. But it was very heavy bombardment at that time. And 2 hours later, they told me that they will go to the south. And then when you're talking about your family, then you're talking about your parents, your sisters, your married sisters, your married brother, and like your husband, his family, and your relatives and your friends. Like, there's so many of them that you want to consider at such times. And then, like, after they told me that, I saw, like, on the news, some vehicle being bombed on the safety corridor that Israel have announced to be safe. I read some news on the radio that many cars and some, like, larger vehicles were also bombarded, where the people were killed on them. I saw some videos And I had no internet and like phone call connection with them because of because Israel have already affected the infrastructure for telecommunication in Gaza. So I wasn't even able to know if they actually went or not, if they tried, if they were injured, if they were, targeted or anything. And that stayed until no news at all. I went to the street. I was just crying, weeping, trying to connect, sometimes screaming, and just trying to understand what's happening. And no news at all until 2 p.m. when I called them, and my sister also responded, and she told me that they made it to the south, but they had 3 cars bombarded in front of them, behind them, on the side, in different places. 2 of them were on the safety corridor. And I didn't know what to do or how to feel, to be relieved, to be, it's very difficult. But directly on the second day, their neighbors, around 120 of the family who had evacuated from the north to the south because of the Israeli claims that it's safe, have been bombarded, and around 120 were killed from this extended family and the people sheltering with them. So I knew it's not safe. I knew it's very difficult to deal with that. And, sometimes it was few hours of no communication because of instability of internet and communication in Gaza with the Israeli damage of infrastructure. But other times it was a totally blackout, where Israel have blacked out all Gaza, no communication, no internet, no radio, nothing at all. No information is getting out at all. In one of that times, it was blackout for around 2 days, around the 5th of November, where my friend and all of his family were targeted and killed, and they still under the rubble until now, more than 2 years of that. And then another time, it was 8 days, and it was the worst at all. And that time, I heard some rumors that the mosque near where my family had sheltered had been bombed, but not normal bombing. It was carpet bombing of the whole area. And my family lives few meters away from that. And I couldn't know anything about them for 8 days. I imagined that they were killed. I imagined that they are injured and I can't reach out to them. I imagined that they were under the rubble and I can't do anything to them. So many scenarios. And finally, when the internet connection or the communication started to come back, I called them. They knew that my brother and father would. My father was praying. My brother was coming from the shopping from the area. Because my father had reached the home on time, but he was on stairs when that happened. My family didn't know anything about him when the carpet bombing was happening, and they went to search for him. He was on a bicycle and his friend was walking. He was able to survive because he was on the bike. The friend did not. He was killed because walking or running was not fast enough. My sisters with the 7 cousins and cousins and nieces that we have were on the roof of the house, and they saw things. They have babies with them, 1 year old or 2 year old, and they had to carry them, jump inside the house, and hope that their house will not be bombarded. So so many such occasions that happened and my family went into, and they sheltered to Rafah, and Rafah itself was evacuated after that. The house where they had evacuated to is either partially destructed or totally bombed. It's at Philadelphia area, so it's still with Israel, or Rafah is still with Israel. Many things happened. I remember I have a cousin. His name is Muhammad. And when he's a baker. So within Israeli aggressions and genocide, he would even bake and just distribute to people to help them survive the famine and all of that. But on the 12th of June this year, it was very difficult. The famine was so bad, and he has 10 siblings. Some of them are married and they have so grandchildren, all of that. So, and they are orphans, and he couldn't feed them. He's like the eldest among them there. And he couldn't feed them. He couldn't even bring them flour. So on the 12th of June, he decided to go to, the Gaza humanitarian organization, or the so-called Gaza humanitarian organization. And when he was there, fetching for food, waiting to get a bag of flour, as he hoped to go back to his family with that to feed them, he was bombed by a quadricopter. And in his head, in his many sharpens in his abdomen, and he was brought back to his family in a white bag of flour, rather than he gets back with it for them. And this is how he was killed, a young 30-year-old Palestinian brave man, a beautiful man who was also always serving his community, and he was trying to feed his orphaned siblings and nieces and nephews. And he ended up being killed in that way for nothing, but because Israel decided to do that. So talking about the family, talking about the relatives, talking about the things they had to go through is unimaginable. All my family, all my extended family, has lost all of their homes, not just the home, but also the land, because most of them are from Rafah. So the land of Rafah is still with Israel. So all of that is gone right now. So they literally have nothing. Many of the family members were killed. This ceasefire, the one we're at right now, this is the first stage of it. Israel have bombed people on multiple occasions. They have made so many breaches of this ceasefire agreement, and they killed more than 250 people. And yesterday they killed around 30 people. And according to the UNICEF, Israel have killed 2 children a day since the beginning of the so-called ceasefire. In the last breach of this ceasefire, 2 weeks ago, Israel have bombed in Mossi area and between Khan Yunis and Rafah at the western border, where much of my family is residing. And both of my cousins, Linda and Kinda, they were there in a tent, have lost everything, but they were at least reassured that they could survive with their daughters. And they survived the genocide. They were happy of that. They celebrated it when the ceasefire started. On that day, in the night, they were bombed, and both of them were in the ICU, severely injured, and both of them had their daughters killed. So even, it's not just the genocide itself when it was ongoing, but even the so-called ceasefire is still bringing death, damage, destruction, and loss for the people in Gaza. So people need to understand that the genocide, before the genocide, after the genocide, if we agree that it actually ended, or it would end, people are still killed by Israel in so many ways, not just the direct killing, but also the indirect with incommunicable diseases, chronic diseases, and infectious diseases, and the control of life, the famine, forced starvation, and all of that.
Wow. The way you just described all of these events, you said it very dryly as if it were a grocery list, because it's very clear, you're so used to this. And this is something that I found as well when I was living in the West Bank at the height of the Second Intifada. The people were just exhausted from it all. It wasn't enough that they had to pass in what would be a 10-minute drive for Israelis on their segregated roads, and for us would be 4 or 5 hours, sometimes less. It depends on the mood of the 19-year-old IDF soldiers, right? But it was a phenomenon to me because I would have to meet people. My first subject I was meeting for my book was a psychiatrist. She and her husband had just bought their new home, and they were about to move in. They had it built, in fact. and they couldn't move in because it had been bombed and we had to redirect our interview to another place. If I had been her, I would have been like, there's no interview happening. She was like, we're going to have to do the interview elsewhere because my house was just bombed. That's and I was shocked. I'm like, if I had been her, I wouldn't have even probably called me. I would have been in tears. You see, there's this thing that I noticed, that people are such under the stress of this constant trauma that they've adapted to it. And so you still function within it. When I was in the West Bank, I had an appointment to go down to the Gaza Community Mental Health Program, where the founder and the then director, Ayad El-Sarraj, was to meet with me. We did the interview by phone, but one of the things that El-Sarraj told me was he underscored the extremely high level of domestic violence due to what was then the second intifada, but we could just generalize and talk about the occupation. And he said the knock-on effect of an entire society whose men are largely targeted in ways to restrict, as I mentioned earlier, their movement. They were rendered impotent in terms of working, bringing in money. And as we know, even in the West, the value of men is largely based on how much do you bring back. These men were completely cut off from their identities, their ability to earn a living, to make a profession. And this is something that a lot of the people I interviewed in the West Bank also noticed. I dealt with many psychologists and psychiatrists about this. And a lot of them were women because they were the ones who were freer to move around and to go to their offices. Could you talk a bit about the knock-on effects of how the occupation has inflected itself in terms of this destabilization of the family that can and does lead to domestic violence?
Yeah, thank you so much. Largely, my life project and my PhD project were the same. My PhD project was the entrance of my life project. It's focusing on the relationship between colonial violence and patriarchal violence, so domestic or family violence, as people in Gaza prefer to call. So I searched the intersection, or I discovered that there is like a intersectional relationship between colonial violence and family violence or domestic violence in Palestine, but mainly in Gaza. And that's like manifested in so many ways. I'll mention like some stories or like some of the things that the people in the interviews told me about. One of the women who was married to a man older than her, but they had no problems at all for a few years. He was working at the 1948 areas at that time, as many other like 200,000 Palestinian men at that time. Because of Israeli control on economic opportunities inside the occupied areas, so they had to go to find opportunities there. And they had like no problems at all. He was very nice. He was generous. He was a lovely man and a very lovely relationship. They had 10 children out of this like lovely marriage. When Israel have stopped those Palestinians from going to work there around the 2000s, she told me that he changed totally. He wasn't bringing any income to the house. The house is, overcrowded. The children has so many needs that need to be covered, and the wife has her needs also, so she can like commit to the family needs and all of those things. It had created a huge tension in the family, and she told me that he changed a lot. He became like violent physically. He psychologically became violent, emotionally became like distant from her and her children. And she wasn't able to deal like with that amount of violence or even like able to stop it. And she like for a first blamed the occupation for that, but also she was aware that it's not a justification for him to become violent. And the same thing happened with another girl I interviewed, talking about her father who had his his company or his business. It was bombed by Israel, and they were like among the very rich families in the area, and they lived like a very fancy, lovely lifestyle. And he was a lovely man. He was also like a very kind father and all of that. And she said after the business was bombed and was gone, her father has changed a lot, and he became very violent toward them, specifically the children. And she was like the eldest. She had to defend the other children a lot, so she had to go through much of the violence herself. She also did the same thing. She blamed him. She understood that the Israeli occupation and the violence of colonialism have created this change in his character, but she also blamed him for the acts, that he shouldn't chose to become this person because of this pressure or because of this loss. So, like in my research, I talk about multiple structural and different aspects of intersection between colonial and patriarchal violence, how the blockade have affected like the home, or have confined women in Gaza, not allowing them to escape even from violence. I talk about the psychological pressure. I talk about the economic pressure with the 1948 workers in Israel, but also like the other businesses that Israel have damaged all over the years, and because of that, more violence has erupted and increased within families. I talk about the Israeli aggressions and how violence, like with the stress, with the fear, with the parents sometimes trying to protect their children from going out or looking from the window, or changing like going outside the room where they think it might be the safest for them, so the children would be beaten from their parents for that, or shouted on because the parents are afraid on them. Like this type of stress and tension is increasing domestic and family violence within aggression themselves, and even after aggressions, with the family losing, their house is lost, their economic source is lost. So the family is living with other families, so there's overcrowdedness, or they're living in schools, no privacy, overcrowdedness, no proper food, no proper sanitation. You can't control the raising of your own children. They are like in the streets all the time. All of those things are like very, very strong reasons behind the increase of domestic violence and family violence. And it's not just like the physical changes, but also like the Israeli violence itself creates things in the family that causes also violence against women or like children, the more marginalized or vulnerable groups. I remember one of the women I interviewed, she told me that she was 12 when her father in the second intifada got lost. So he was among the men who went to demonstrate in the intifada. And after that, he was maybe imprisoned or something. She didn't share that, but he was like away for a time. And because of that, her uncles stepped in and forced her to be married as a child. So the lack of a father figure, or the lack of, the family continuity or the family protection, made the extended family make decisions against the will of the mother for the young daughter, also against her will, the young girl to be married at that time, because they were afraid of two things. They were afraid of the reputation of the family generally, because there is no father, no one's taking care of the children and all of that. And they were very scared of the sexual attacks of Israel. They were afraid that Israel will sexually assault or abuse any of the daughters. So any of them who was like in an age that might be, exposed to violence from Israel, they got them married early. So Israel have created an environment in the past and also in the present that made families make decisions that they wouldn't make otherwise. And the same act of marrying some girls on a young age has also came back in this Israeli genocide in Gaza. I remember one of the participants I like worked with in Gaza in the field work shared with me at the second pause in March. He told me that Hala, few months before this pause, a father who was like the sole survivor from his own family and the extended family of him and his wife, because they were all like sheltering in one place and they got bombed. He only survived along with his 12-year-old daughter. They survived alone. And he told me he was so scared on her because he's old, and he was like afraid that maybe he would be killed like as any other person who might be killed in any moment, or he might die of the chronic diseases he has of his old age. And because of that, he kept thinking, how could he protect his only surviving daughter from everything around her? How could he ensure that she will get food, she will get shelter, she will get people around her, while the whole extended family from both sides is killed? So his only solution was to get her married. And he got her married 2 months before the pause happened, and he was killed a few days before the pause. And she was left with the new husband that had married her. And in Gaza law, it's not legal. It's not legal to get married on that age. So it wouldn't be registered legally. She will not be protected legally. And she's like in problems. But for the father, that was the only solution he thought of and he could obtain. And it's very injustice for the daughters, injustice for the father that he had to make that decision. It's injustice for the whole family, extended family that was killed because Israel wanted them to be killed in the genocide. So we're talking about not just like systematic, structural, violent and outcomes of this violence that's affecting domestic space and increasing domestic and family violence, but also creating of an environment where people were be tending to make decisions that are violent to their own families. But for them, they had no other choice other than choosing to do this in hoping that will bring a little bit of protection for their family members.
You're listening to Savage Minds, and we hope you're enjoying the show. Please consider subscribing. We don't accept any money from corporate or commercial sponsors, and we depend upon listeners and readers just like you. Now, back to our show. This is extremely dark, what you've just described. Yet, this is what I also observed in the West Bank. All of us, when we're in our teens, we dream of what we want to do with our future, what we want to study, where we want to study or work or go to live. And these are the dreams that Palestinians can't really have because they're limited a priori by the rules that Israel sets in place. And in the West Bank, I noticed that men were under severe lock and key. There were lists of men who could not leave their towns. The IDF controlled the male presence much more than women. Women were perceived as less of a threat. Hence, my work there, I worked on a book on the first 5 female intifada suicide bombers.
Yeah.
It was really interesting to talk to their families. I remember I was with the family of Wafa Idris, and they showed me her photo. They talked about her work. Many people don't realize that she was an ambulance worker. Oh my God, okay, I'm getting goosebumps talking about her now. She was older. A lot of the female suicide bombers were in their early 20s. She was not. And she had seen so much death and destruction. And she was like, I want to do something, that's going to make a difference. I became very attracted discursively to these women while I was reading about them from afar. And I thought, what would drive a person to kill themselves? Because, of course, if you recall back then, the discourse was the 99 black-eyed houris, the virgins that men would have in the afterlife, and they would become shaheed and all this, frankly, bullshit that the Western media pumped out. So I said to myself, well, how are we going to explain these 5 women? What are their stories? The West can't possibly spin them as lesbians. They couldn't possibly spin this madness. So I went there and I uncovered their stories. The stories were just as tragic of that of the men who've died, not just the suicide bombers, of everyone. What do you see now on this ridiculous Trump, quote unquote, peace process that's nothing related to a peace process, his having put the most ridiculous of buffoons in charge, people like his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and Tony Blair,
the criminals.
These are war criminals, for sure, especially Blair. Blair belongs in a dungeon. What do you see as the prognosis for what's going on right now? And I mean, I'm coming from the point of view of the genocide in Gaza simply did not start in 2023. It was intensified in 2023, but there's always been an ethnic cleansing since 1948. And it's been on the order of a slow drip, drip, drip. Clearly, because the people executing this slow genocide, many were themselves survivors of a previous genocide. So what do you see as the near future prognosis for what is happening?
It's so funny. It's not funny. It's like a deliberate thing that the West always does, and the colonial power make it. They call it a peace plan and peace process and peace council and peace, all of those things, while using the peace in the middle, while the US itself has been the only reason for why the Security Council decisions to stop the genocide over Gaza were stopped. The only reason was the US. They had their veto, they raised it, and for that reason, I think at least 4 to 5 times the veto was used to eliminate and, paralyze any ability to end the genocide in Gaza. So if the US has ever thought or considered peace, they would have pressured Israel by this Security Council decision to stop the genocide. But this is not what they want. They want to control, they want to dominate, they want to make something new. This is another manifestation of the Western Western mandate, Western control, or colonialism and settler colonialism, as Israel is doing. But in Gaza, they are trying a new form, a new project, where the war criminals, the people who have committed many crimes, and the people who are sending arms to Israel and funds to Israel to commit the genocide they are committing in Gaza, they are the people thinking that they will be the best people to govern Gaza and, decide the future of the generations there. More than 1 million children are residing in Gaza right now, and their future will be in the hand of people who committed, enabled, and complicit in the genocide against them and their families. So it's not a peace plan. It's a plan to control. It's a plan to show the world that the US, Israel, is able to do whatever they want. It's a plan to keep, violating, abusing, and killing the Palestinians, but in different forms and different shapes. Some people might think that a transitional period where other Palestinians would come after that and lead the scene, but no, it will not. As long as they are making the decisions from their own minds, from their own pockets, and imposing those and implementing those decisions over us with the peace board that they have created, then Palestinians will not be in the lead. And this itself is antagonizing the US position on the two-state solution. And they're claiming that they believe that a Palestinian leadership should be, and a sovereignty of Palestine could be a solution. Because if you are imposing foreigners, imposing criminals, imposing people controlling the Palestinians who have been murdering them, so that you're not talking at all about any type of solution, about any type of peace, about any type of justice to the Palestinian community. It's just a continuation of the ethnic cleansing. And yesterday, this plan is governed by Israel and the US. And yesterday, Netanyahu has, shamelessly shared that Gaza border, if it opened, it will be only to exit. It will not open to enter. So people will not be allowed to go back, including myself, to my homeland, to my Gaza, to my people, to my relatives. And only people who are pushed outside in ethnic cleansing way will be only allowed to get out, if that ever happened. Because at least for me, I see that Israel is amusing, and they have that sadistic interest in seeing and committing crimes against the Palestinians. So they're not allowing them even to escape outside Gaza. Gaza is the only place where people are literally being killed, starved, and, maimed while not being allowed to go out to escape, to get treatment, or to get any breath outside Gaza. So for me, like, Israel is amusing itself with getting people inside Gaza blocked, maimed, and tortured in the way they are doing. And as they said, it's going to be only exit from inside Gaza, not entrance. So they are not looking for any prosperous future for Gazans, for the Palestinians inside Gaza. And if that means something, it means that whatever happened in Gaza, if this Israeli-US plan succeeded, then it will be repeated elsewhere in the West Bank and Jerusalem, 1948 areas, and not just in Palestine. Israel have bombed 7 countries so far within the time of the genocide. So that will extend to those countries and maybe to other countries in the area, which again, extension of the US also plans in what they called the Middle East. So for me, I don't see like prosperous future specifically with this plan, as long as it's not the Palestinians who are deciding who is governing them, and it's not their futures, their hopes, their goals that's being looked after, then it's gonna be another type of genocide that's committed, but in a different way, and the scene will be revealed bit by bit.
Could you talk a bit about your research? Because I'm very interested in what you are doing in your doctoral research and your other writings regarding the reproductive violence. One of your articles, in fact, is called Reproductive Violence, a Settler Colonial Strategy, Reprocide in Gaza. And I've read the articles that you sent me, which look at the kind of deliberate deprivations of women from reproductive health care, from the facilities, as we've known, those of us who've lived in the West Bank, it's just not an uncommon crisis, unfortunately, that women will be barred access to hospitals and left to bleed out at a checkpoint. And your work looks at some of these issues. Could you talk a bit about what you call reprocide?
So first of all, reproductive genocide or reprocide is not my PhD project. My PhD project is about Palestinian women between colonial and patriarchal violence. It was like a mobilization, community mobilization against domestic violence that we had done in Gaza with community members and decision makers to combat domestic violence, but in a decolonial way. So to understand how this like knowledge or law is actually coming from British Mandate time, for instance, as our criminal law, all of it comes from British Mandate time in 1936. So it's not a Palestinian law, and so many other things. The community worked together to combat it. So that was my PhD research and my life project. However, as an activist from Gaza, people within the genocide kept sending me their testimonies, telling me that they had like encountered violence while they were like pregnant or in the delivery, or what happened to their wives. So the men also shared that, or fathers, what happened to their children and such things. And they told me to share those testimonies everywhere, to talk about them, to publish them, and all of that. I started talking in events, demonstrations, and such places about those things. But then I thought that talking about the story each time will not bring the holistic and like the systematic attack aspect of it, which is actually happening. So I need to use what like Mads Gilbert, for instance, calls evidence-based solidarity, and start writing about it and make sure that like I have peer-reviewed article that's more valid with those like evidence. So I started, I wrote the article about reprocide. Reprocide is a term coined by Ross in 2017. And I just like developed it and used it in a context of Israeli settler colonialism, in a context of genocide and illegal military occupation. So that like the context I used the term in. And it's like reproductive and genocide. So reprocide is about the targeting, intentional and systematic targeting of the reproductive health and also the reproductive capacities and the infrastructure. So all aspects that help in reproduction, and it's like gendered. So it's not just about women; it's also about men, their reproductive health, their ability to reproduce and to be intimate, and the same for women. It also, like, I speak about reprocide as one of the Israeli strategies of as a settler colonial power, because in settler colonialism you annihilate, replace by settler. To annihilate, there are like so many ways, among them to kill those who exist right now. But another way is to kill them and also obstruct their ability to reproduce. So you're killing the present and also the future. So reprocide is about the present and also the future aspects of reproduction or like existence, and those who exist also to reproduce. And I speak about how this reprocide is a continuation of Israeli strategies. It's not something new or unique about the genocide in Gaza. Israel have always attacked the reproductive health for Palestinians, and as you said, in the West Bank, in Jerusalem, in 1948 areas, there's always different ways and tools Israel uses for each geography, but they use like those different tools of oppression and violence to have in the end obliteration or affect and violence over reproductive health of the Palestinians. In the genocide, we've seen that more exaggerated and more like manifested in different ways. Among them, let's say the health. There is like a common example that people mention, and even the UN have mentioned, with the Israeli targeting of the Basma fertility clinic, the largest fertility clinic in Gaza, damaging and killing more than 4,000 fertilized embryos and 1,000 unfertilized eggs and sperms. So we're talking about the destruction of 5,000 potential lives. So their present, their future, and their ability to reproduce. With this killing or this like destruction of those potential lives, we're talking about at least 5,000 couples, families in Gaza who have been obliterated. They were prevented of having offspring, of having children, because many of them have saved for years to be able to do this operation. So very probably most of them don't have other children. That's why they invested this much in this operation, emotionally, financially, and like health-wise. So we're talking about those 5,000 families who have been obliterated, not able to form families. But also Israel didn't just destruct the embryos and the sperms, but also they destructed the building itself. So the infrastructure, the machines that help this fertility clinic to revive and continue. So even those families, if they saved again and try to go through the same process in the future, they will not be able. The infrastructure is distracted. If other families who had fertility problems had sought such solutions to have children, they will not be able to do that. So we're talking about this. We're talking about also the killing of people who enable procreation. So the killing of parents, the killing of a father or the mother, leaving the partner widow or widower, so without someone to have intimacy to reproduce with. In Gaza, we have at least now, Israel have created 14,000 widow. 14,000, it's an unimaginable number. I myself know at least 9. Israel have also created many widowers. We don't know the exact number of them, but it's going to be a lot because 70% of the whole casualties or killed in Gaza are women and children. So the number will be very, very big. So there is like the killing of those people who enable creation. There's all the health infrastructure that Israel have, damaged. Israel have, with the Israeli genocide and the damage of the health structure and the hospitals and all of that, the miscarriage rate has increased to 300% few months after the beginning of the genocide. Many women are suffering from malnourishment, starvation, many communicable diseases. As you said, polio, my friend, she's a doctor, she described capturing the polio specifically for pregnant women as a sip of water, as easy as getting a polio. So infectious diseases and all like those health risks are now affecting the Palestinian community, women and men. The second aspect I talk about is the infrastructure, bombed now, die later. So Israel have created an environment such as right now with a bombing in some places or sometimes is stopping, but people are continuing to be harmed, to be killed, to be starving, to be suffering in different ways. Because the health infrastructure, 80% of it is damaged. The maternity wards, many of them have been damaged. Many of the doctors, senior doctors, are either killed or kidnapped by the Israeli occupation. So women and their babies can't get like the best service that they should be offered at such times by such facilities and doctors and resources. We're talking about the infrastructure damage that enables the spread of infectious diseases, the damage that produced, Israel have bombed Gaza in more than, I don't know how many X now of Hiroshima bomb. But all of those, like the bombing debris, the homes destructed debris, the 10,000, at least 10,000 people underneath the rubble who are decomposing right now, the chemicals of all the bombing, all of those things are affecting the general health of women, men, and their children and babies who are coming to life. And with that also, like Israel have strict the blockade since Gallant have said that they will not allow water, food, electricity, and internet into Gaza. They have strict the blockade very much to the level that children, moms, and dads are starving, and even infants are not able to find baby formula for months in Gaza because of that. But there is also another very important thing in the destruction of infrastructure. If you wanted intimacy between couples, you need homes, you need rooms, you need privacy, specifically at a place as Gaza. So the destruction of homes and the destruction of infrastructure is also disabling people from reproduction because there is no sources of that. But also people who, even if people wanted intimacy but didn't want reproduction, it's very difficult even to do that because Israel is not allowing condoms and other protective medicines from entering Gaza, contraceptives from entering Gaza. So they are controlling the ability to the agency in general. They can't try to conceive, and they can't even decide not to, even if they wanted, because of the situation around them. The third strategy I talk about is sexual violence and maiming of men and children. And you've seen the last report by the Palestine Center of Human Rights, where they speak about different testimonies of women and men at Israeli detention camps who have been victims of sexual violence. Among them, a 42-year-old mother who have been gang raped by 4 soldiers over 3 days. In the Israeli detention camp. Another man was also sexually assaulted and raped by a dog used by Israeli soldiers or prison guards in one of the Israeli detention camps. Another boy, 18-year-old, very young, was raped at least 6 times using a bottle. And those rapes of women and men, and some of them are against the children, this sexual assault is affecting them physically, but also affecting them emotionally, psychologically. How would they be able to be intimate with the other after they have been raped? Post-traumatic disorder will affect them if it was ever post. Those women and men and children will also have physical and emotional difficulties in being married and forming families and all of that for God. And it's important to understand that this tool or sexual violence have been gendered a lot. And multiple of the documentations and reports documenting that, verifying the sexual violence, have shown that men have been the ultimate victim of this, with stripping them naked, with videotaping them, sexually assaulting them, raping them physically in person by the soldiers, or by plastic bottles or electric bars or metallic bars. All of that have happened and been documented, and sometimes it was done by female Israeli soldiers or Israeli prison guards because they want also to attack the intimacy between the male and female, to be able to target the reproduction itself. And there are like some reports of raping and sexual assaulting children, and that affects the psyche of parents who are thinking of having children. How would they think of having children in such environment, with bombardment, with lack of schools, with maiming of the children, with severely injuring them, with the famine, and also with the fear that those children might be sexually assaulted by Israeli soldiers. So all of it together is affecting the decision of having children, the ability to have them, and even the thought of it. So like this is mainly what I talk about when I talk about the reproductive genocide or reprocide, and how Israel is affecting the generations of Palestinians, not just in the present, but also in the future. And it's like a long-term strategy Israel have used even like before the genocide.
Could you talk a bit about the ways in which reproduction in Gaza is being completely dislodged, obviously with the current genocide, but the ways in which the complete destruction of the hospitals, for instance, is creating a larger crisis on the horizon, because hospitals aren't built in a few months.
Yeah. So speaking about that, as I said, there are like more than 80% of hospitals in Gaza are damaged. The rest of those hospitals are lacking resources, lacking doctors, lacking, the medical materials. I talked recently with a friend of mine. He's still in Gaza. He's a doctor, and he told me that only one hospital in Gaza or two hospitals in Gaza are partially functioning. Shifa Hospital, which all of us know that it was demolished by Israel, but like some buildings are being reused in like their way of destruction because they have no other choice. The other places, clinics working, are small clinics providing very primary, like not just a primary healthcare, but very primitive healthcare with lack of resources, lack of medical supplies, and lack of enough doctors. Most of the hospitals or like the clinics in Gaza are functioned and run, even within the genocide or specifically within the genocide, by students. So when I talk with my colleagues in Gaza, medical colleagues in Gaza, they tell me that like 90 or 95% of those functioning the hospital are student nurses, student doctors, student dentists, and such. Because Israel have killed more than like around, now there are around 2,000 doctors and medical staff killed by Israel, and they detained hundreds of them. So we're talking about the most senior doctors being either killed or, vanished. Or forcibly disappeared by Israel. So those, even like the little small infrastructure functioning in Gaza, are also run by non-professionals or people who don't have enough experience to deal generally, but even to deal with catastrophic situation of massacres and genocide that the most professional doctor and even those like international missions coming from outside are struggling to deal with. So with this like environment, imagine the feeling of a mom and dad who have the baby coming, and they're thinking of where should they go so they can deliver their baby safe. If the hospital is not running, if the hospital is not well equipped, what should they do? Unfortunately, they don't have any other option but to go there and get whatever service they can get. And unfortunately, getting to those damaged places with lack of resources is the best scenario ever, because many of the people I interviewed and even friends of mine, they told me that they had to deliver on the stairs while they were I remember a friend of mine, Karim Abu Sharia, told me about his wife, Amina. It was at the time when the north of Gaza was under siege by Israeli soldiers and tanks. There were a ground invasion. And they tried to reach the hospital. Like, she had the pain of delivery. She was in labor, and they called like ambulances, and no one was reachable. Even there was no answer at all. And they started communicating with a doctor they know online from Romania, asking him what to do because they had no choice. And Karim, my friend, decided that the best thing to do is to get her to the hospital, even if it's dangerous, because either she would die of the pain and the baby would die in delivery because they can't handle it, or they would be killed by the Israelis in the building or while they are getting there. So he thought like trying would be the best thing. While he was carrying her from the sixth floor going down to the ground floor to get the car and get her out, she started delivering, and she delivered on the stairs. They had her mom and his sister with them, and all of them had no experience at all in dealing with that, only communicating with that doctor online. She fainted, she bled, she went into it was a very difficult labor. And they were not able to even use the lights, so they had to use phone lights cautiously because they were afraid of quadricopter around the building that might bomb them at any second if they, so alive inside. So they had to do that delivery on the stairs in those situations, very afraid. None of them was equipped to do that. They had nothing with them to help them. And after the delivery, they went to the third floor where his sister is staying, because they couldn't go up in the buildings because of her health situation. On the second day, he wasn't even able to take her to the hospital. He was able only to get to the pharmacy and get some medication that the doctor suggested that she takes, and some gauze and such stuff that to deal with after delivery. And on the other day, Israel have bombed the building, the floor where they were living, but not the one of his sister. So they only survived because they were few floors underneath, and they had to deal with the whole building being shaking, exploding, shrapnels and debris coming from everywhere, and to live with that with a 2-year-old, 2-day-old baby. So this is only one of the examples of what women and men as parents had to go through, and the baby had to go through the genocide. Many told me how they had to deliver in tents because they also were surrounded by quadricopters, tanks, and they couldn't do anything or walk to the hospital. A friend of mine, she's a mom of 3 at that time. The baby, the last baby was the 4th one, and her and her husband had to deliver her in the tent. After delivering, she had nothing to cut the umbilical cord or to check on the baby, so she needed to go to the hospital. And her husband insisted that he will take her, but she refused. She told him, "I know I am a target. I am a mother and I have a baby, and I look pregnant. So if they saw me, they will target me and the baby, and I don't want you to be also targeted because our other 3 children will be orphaned of both of us. So you stay with them. So if I was targeted, you will survive and stay with them." And she went alone. She walked 20 miles to the clinic, the nearest to her, until she reached the hospital, and they dealt with her and the baby. And those are among the small decisions that people or parents had to make within the genocide, not to mention the moms who had C-sections, the severing and opening of 7 layers of their body, of their abdomen, without anesthesia to deliver the babies. Not to mention the trauma of doctors who had to deliver moms who were killed and brought from underneath the rubble to bring the injured, malnourished, or the immature baby from inside them, because they can't leave them die inside. So they had to deliver and make a C-section on a killed mom to get a baby outside without a mother, very probably without any family surviving to protect or take care of them, without incubators working because Israel either bombed them or cut the electricity and fuel, so many of them were not working, without even baby formula. So you can imagine the medical decision of dads and moms delivering such babies, or such killed moms and babies, without anyone to take care of them. It's so difficult, and it's it's widespread. It's widespreading. It's affecting the people, the couple who had this experience, the doctors and nurses or medical staff who were there, or the family members who were there, and the people seeing or hearing about those stories and imagining that they will be in the same situation if they got pregnant. So it's affecting everyone. And yesterday I saw a video of the health ministry spokesperson, Dr. And he was saying that there is a decrease 40% of babies or delivered babies or newborns in Gaza and the genocide in compared to the years before. So it is affecting not just like the fear, but all of that reproductive genocide is affecting the people ability of getting pregnant and also securing, secure and safe delivery after that. And even if we thought like of the after process, vaccinations are not allowed in Gaza, or were not allowed in Gaza for most of the genocide period. If we're talking about food, many of the children are malnourished and they are suffering from anemia. Their moms and dads too, but we're talking about developing children who need food so they can actually develop their cognitive functions, their developmental functions, their physical abilities and their mindset and all of that. So malnourished children. We're talking about children who have been away from schools for 2 years. Like in Palestine, specifically in Gaza, we love education. Not because like we love it, it's very beautiful, but we know that it's the only thing that could maybe that we use to survive, either like finding jobs or better opportunity, building home, or even any prosperous opportunity could come, maybe because of education. But it's not something like people would rush for, specifically children. You don't usually see children saying like, I love to go back to school, I miss school. It's not the common thing. But in the genocide, we've seen that. We've seen children crying and weeping, wishing to go back to school, wishing for a normal life, wishing to go school, back home, have food, have family around them, doing the homework, and then going back to school rather than being in the street all the time, bombardment all the time, and all of those things. But children also know that when schools are on, then there wouldn't be a genocide or aggression because they will start after. So the whole infrastructure, the damage of health infrastructure, educational health infrastructure, the scholastic side is affecting, like also affecting reprocide and reproductive genocide in so many ways. So Israel have enabled or produced multiple strategies of genocidal violence that all of them are working together in a way or another.
This is extremely sobering and sad. What are your plans now? You're obviously in the UK. Do you have any plans to return, or what are your thoughts about the future of your life in Gaza?
Before the genocide, I had a very clear plan of the next 5-10 years of my life, continuing my project in Gaza and keeping returning each 2 to 3 months to follow up with community groups that we created inside Gaza, working with decision makers to making change. But that was before the genocide. Since the genocide, I literally have no idea. My wish is to go back to Gaza, not just to live there, because if I am going to wish something not realistic, is to go back to Gaza and be with people. But if I'm going to be realistic, I need to be not, to be thinking of the others, not selfish. Because if I went, let's say that the genocide is over, borders are open, and I went back to Gaza, I'll have to search for a job. Then I'll take a job from someone in Gaza who's, for me, is a priority than me who came from outside to get their job. I'll search for a home that will take me, because we lost, all of my family had their homes damaged, all of them, my family and even my husband's family. I would have to look for home. This home is a place that other people in Gaza who survived the genocide should have stayed in. So when I think about going back to Gaza, I think that I don't want to use the scarce resources people in Gaza are trying to find. If I would go back to Gaza, it would be because I have something to offer them inside. So I come with a project that enable people to work and benefit from. I come with resources that I distribute to people and give it to them, but I don't go to get whatever small things or little things that they have. So like my dream, my wish is to be able to go back to Gaza and serve the people there, because it's the thing I couldn't do within the genocide. I was like speaking, mobilizing, politically, media and everything, and academically even, but I wasn't able to help people like on the ground. So my wish now is to be able to go back there as soon as possible and to be helpful, not just using or abusing their resources.
Right now, how is your family living? How are they sleeping? You see these photos of people sleeping amidst the rubble, or more romantically on the beach, although it's not romantic because it's bloody cold now, right?
Yeah, and what? So just before talking about that, there's something still in my mind about how we lose or we adapt to the changes or the loss. And this is something that people don't understand about we Palestinians and maybe people inside Gaza. That it's not adapting, it's surviving. We are trying our best to survive, and to do that, you need to, within the genocide, people didn't grieve, although they lost like the most important things and people dear to their life, because they were surviving only. They couldn't think of any other thing. Another thing is that we know that the opportunity to be heard is scarce. So we're not like usually looked after by international media and Western media. So in the context of the family you told me about, that she told you like her house was bombed or distracted, and she told you, yeah, we can do it in another place. It's because they know that it's opportunity they shouldn't miss. Their testimony of what happened to them might go viral, and they might get justice for that, or might not, but at least people would know about their suffering. It's something very, very important for us who have been dehumanized for decades and not heard, not seen, not believed for decades. So people try to do that as a priority over any other thing if they can. The third thing came to my mind when you also talked about people talking, or people like trying to talk about that and like, not showing emotions, is a decision I myself had made within the genocide and even before. The West has, or some of them, they dehumanizes you, but also if you show emotion, they dequalify you. You will not be seen as objective or as like rational being. If you show emotions, you will be seen as someone irrational, someone shouldn't be believed. And that's also why many of us are trying to, confine ourselves to be seen as rational, quiet, calm people. So we're not dehumanized more. So we are at least heard. So there's like multiple layers of racism add to that. We are racist toward ourselves and our emotions, not to show them. So the West, who like the Western viewers, some of them who are racist toward us, would at least give us a chance and listen to us when we like press and confine our emotions. So yeah, that's what I just felt it's very important to speak about, because we're not feeling less, we're not emotionless. It's just too much of things that's happening to us, and people have to deal with on the moment, while at the same time trying to bear witness and document those testimonies to whoever can hear us whenever they wish, not whenever we wish, because we don't have that privilege. Not to mention that some people who are pushed to those like boundaries or to those angles are also children who, for instance, a friend of mine, he worked with two children, one 8 and other 5, and he was treating them when the child told him, I know that my parents are killed, but don't tell my other brother. And like the doctor started crying, because like if the international world have seen that, they would say, wow, such a resilient child. But it's not. Child should not be this way, child should not lose their parents, children should not be injured in hospitals, they should not be facing genocide. But when they do, and they feel that they need to survive, they try to protect. And it's something that they shouldn't be appreciated or seen as heroes for. We should feel so sad for that and try to help rather than, seeing it and glorifying such acts, because it comes only from despair and sadness and having no other choice. So they jump in to survive. Yeah. So before the genocide, this phase of ceasefire have started, I had one wish, that the ceasefire would end because of the global desire, because of the global pressure. Because I knew if it ended because of the global pressure, then Israel would think once and twice before making another genocide or, continuing it. But if it ended only because Israel and the US wanted it to end at that time, then there is no guarantee at all that Israel will not continue it after they take whatever privileges they want from stopping it for a while. And it would mean that they will expand it elsewhere. And unfortunately, it only ended because the US and Israel wanted that at that time. It wasn't because of a global pressure or such stuff. So I don't see, unfortunately, a good future for Gaza and Palestine right now, unless in one thing. So I said this scenario. The other scenario that could be seen or could be looked or hoped for is that it actually stopped, not because of the, political desire and people in power pressure over Israel, but because the international, international movement, the people demonstrations, people disobedience in multiple places. Italy had multiple disobediences even before the ceasefire plan was announced. So we're talking about a huge mass disobedience and demonstrations and things that the people in power did not like. And Israel is seeing that people are now believing that it's not a democracy, it's a war criminal state, it belongs to Hague, they have committed genocide, they are committing rape and sexual assault while bragging about that, and calling to protect the rapists. So it's a very weird mindset the world does not accept at all. So Israel is also seeing that. So my wish, against the thing I described earlier, is that it had stopped because the public relationship and the public image of Israel and the US have been affected, and they needed to do something. That's why they were the people who actually made or showed that it's gonna have an end, hopefully. And if that was the case, then the world will start seeing another future, will start seeing another pathway. And it would only come if people kept on the same things that allowed this to happen. So the same amount of demonstrations, the refusal of injustice, not just in Palestine or Gaza, but all over, in Sudan, Congo, and so many other places facing injustices because of the West grade of those colonized communities. So the international community need to keep bearing witness, keep working hard, keeping the efforts, sustainable efforts to disable all of those, the armed factories, disable all the funding for the wars, all the funding for genocides, all the funding for the murder of people for profit, and disable the ability of getting people in power politically who are believing in those injustices so they can get more money or more profits out of that. So the world is now in, I would say, two roads, and they have to choose. Either they just feel relieved that they got something and give up doing anything else and feel exhausted, or they work sustainably to make sure that all the efforts have been done is continuing, all the injustices that we have seen and witnessed in Gaza are not repeated, not in Gaza, not elsewhere, and at the same time make sure that those in power are being replaced by people who actually represents the people who live in those places. Because the decisions of those in power, at least in the UK and so many other countries, have not been representative of the public, have not been representative of the mass people who have been going out day by day and week by week to demonstrate against a genocide. So they need to change those people in power who are, not making the right decisions and the representative decisions of their people. So the future I see is a future depending on the people will and what they do. And our future or our hope is dependent on specifically the new generation. If they were able to continue the work they have started and to keep going harder and harder, then we will be able to get a free Palestine, but also a free world from all of those justices.